everyone, my name is Macy Markwell and I chose to talk about Plasmodium falciparum. So Plasmodium falciparum is a gram-positive bacteria, but it can be affected by gram-negative bacteria as well. Plasmodium falciparum is a protozoa, so this means that it is a living cell, but it is a single cell. In some instances, it can be parasitic, and other times it can be okay, but in this instance, Plasmodium falciparum is parasitic. So what happens is a mosquito will latch onto a host, and in this instance, it'll be the human. So it'll latch onto the human, and it will inject the human with Plasmodium. So what happens after this is the person is injected with the Plasmodium, so then it travels through their body and then it ends up attacking the erythrocytes. So the erythrocytes will end up changing shape, and it changes shape because the Plasmodium goes through a cycle in the body. So the first cycle that it goes through is a exoerythrocytic phase. So what happens is the Plasmodium changes into the sporozoites, and the sporozoites reaches the liver and the liver cells, and it affects the liver and everything like that. And what happens is when it's in there, it will start to undergo schizozogony, and this produces merozoites. And after that, the merozoites will be in there, and then the merozoites will rupture in the liver cells. So when this happens, it'll travel through the bloodstream. So then that phase is complete, and the next cycle begins. The next cycle is the erythrocytic cycle. So what happens is the merozoites some of them will be freely floating around in the bloodstream in the body, and then it'll actually enter the erythrocytes. Also, the first one was actually on the outside of the erythrocytes, and then now the erythrocytic cycle is actually in the erythrocytes. So the merozoites go into your erythrocytes, and it ends up becoming trophozoites. So after it becomes trophozoites, then this is an indicator that malaria is present in the body. Now, malaria is formed from Plasmodium, and it is in. So then after the trophozoites go through that, they're in the body, they're in the blood cells and the livers, and it's away from the liver now. After that cycle is over, then the sporogonic phase begins. And what happens with this is when the mosquito is feeding off of the human, then it creates a gametocytes in the erythrocytes. So it's just a process. So then the mosquito can produce more Plasmodium, so it produces more merozoites. So the female mosquito and the male mosquito will come together, and they'll create the zygote from the gametes, and it ends up creating the oocyte, or the zygote, that's in the mosquito's gut wall. And then when it's ready to feed again, the merozoites will come out of it, and there'll be thousands of them. So then the mosquito is ready to feed on another person and insert the Plasmodium, the merozoites, into a person again. So there are many different places that malaria or Plasmodium falciparum that is indicated in the world. So there's over 109 countries infested with malaria and Plasmodium falciparum. And a lot of times they're in the regions where it's like the tropics and subtropics, so places where it's warm, it's humid all the time. And some of these places are Africa, South Asia, and the Middle East. So a lot of times they will be near the water in places like that, but these are some indicators where they are. Also, though, they can be in South America and places like that, it's just more controlled in the other places. In these places, it's more prominent. So some symptoms that a person will have to indicate that they do have malaria. It's kind of hard though, because you will get the fevers or chills. So it's more like not a chronic illness. It's more of like a level-headed illness. And this can be hard to determine, because you just think, oh, you may have the fever or something like that, but in this instance you do have the fever and chills. But once it continues, then certain systems in the body will fail. So you'll have renal failure and also some other failures to the body. And also an indicator is when your urine changes color. So your urine will end up turning a darker color throughout that. So there are many treatment plans that can get rid of malaria, but the one that is prominent right now is the artemisinin-based combination therapy. So what it does is they take the derivative, the artemisinin, and they combine it with a drug. Now there's like 5 different types of drugs that they can do it with, because every person is different and they're not always going to respond to the same type. So what happens is a person usually has to take it for multiple days, like 1 to 4 days, but sometimes they have to take it even longer depending on how severe it is. But a lot of times when a person gets malaria, it's very rapid in the body, so you want to catch it as soon as you can. A lot of times though, in the beginning, around like the 1950s and 60s, the chloroquine was actually the prominent medication that was given to the people who had malaria, but then over time it started to wear out, so people were still getting the malaria and they weren't recovering from it. Also, many studies have been done with malaria with like rats and things like that. The rats were injected with the chloroquine and also the artemisinin, and right now the artemisinin is the one that is the most effective at this time. So there are some ways that you can prevent from getting malaria. So when you're traveling to these countries that are infested with malaria, it is a good idea to take steps prior of your time going over there. So what happens is you can take some medications. A lot of times people will take atovaquone or proguanil, and these are just some medications that will help prevent you from contracting malaria when you are in these places. So when you are traveling there, or the people who are who originate from that region, it is always a good idea to wear long clothing, like long sleeves or long pants, if it is tolerable. I know sometimes it can be, the temperature can be a little extreme, but if you can cover yourself as much as you can, it's not as easy for the mosquitoes to penetrate through the clothing. Also, insect repellent is a great way to prevent the mosquitoes from coming onto you and, infecting you. Also, if the people live in this region, it's a good idea to put netting over their bed while they are sleeping at night, because a lot of times mosquitoes will be around at night, even though it's not light out. And a lot of places it is more open and things like that. Also in these regions though, they do have insecticides, and they reduce standing water, because a lot of times mosquitoes do come around when there's more standing water, because they like that area.